Despite the Minister of Education, Adamu's statements that the federal government had addressed most of the union's demands, including the release of 50 billion naira for the payments of earned allowances for the academic and non-academic staff of universities, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, on Monday extended its 6-month-old strike indefinitely until the federal government meets its demands. With about 178 days to go to the general election, spontaneous and widespread anger and knocks for the government and the ASU trailed the latter's decision to extend it 6 months, which began in February. Well, joining us now to discuss the ASU strike extension is Issa Aremu, Director General of the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labour Studies in Ilorin, Kwara State. Comrade, many thanks for joining us on the morning show today. What are your comments on ASU suspending this strike indefinitely?
Well, Leila, let me say good morning, and through you, same compliment to Dr. Abati as well as Oseni Rufai. Well, I think my take, or our take as an institute, is that what we have in our hand is crisis of collective bargaining. It's also a legacy crisis. Of course, the 6-month long industrial action by ASU now has captured the imagination, but you know that since 1999 to date, the universities have been shut down for close to 16 times. Started with the government of President Obasanjo. I think lasted almost about 5 months. Same thing under the late President Yaradua, of course, President Jonathan. So this is a legacy crisis. And like any other prolonged crisis, you need to also have a sober reflection to see how do we solve the problem. I think it is clear that there should be a paradigm shift in the education sector. A situation in which, for whatever reason, government will go to agreement that it's clear cannot be enforced or cannot be implemented for one or two reasons. I think we need to change from that. Agreement must be respected and it must be enforceable, and it must be seen to be called collective agreement in the world of work. Agreement is not a substitute for memorandum of understanding, memorandum of action. No. Agreement is collective to the extent that both the employers and the workers through their unions agree after they must have looked at all the factors that inform negotiation, namely the demands of the workers, in this case, demand of ASU members, legitimate demands about their pay and allowances, including the payment system they talk about, Then the government, in this case as employer, must also look at the numbers, ability to pay, when do we pay, what will be the relativity. Don't forget that ASU is also not working in a silo. ASU academic members, they also have non-academic members. NASU have non-academic staff unions, which represent, hundreds of thousands of workers in that sector. You have senior staff association. So any agreement you go into, government must also look at the relativity. What's the implication? Because you may give one, we may address the concern of academics. Others will like to also ask for their demand. So what I'm saying is that these are the processes that we should learn to go through. And any outcome that comes from that freely, known as collective agreement, can be enforceable. Then, for whatever reason, don't forget, there are also macroeconomic stabilities, there are changes. So you may also have reopener clause to your agreement so that all of you will anticipate, the new development and sit down to discuss. But even with the best of effort, there will only be disputes in the world of work. What would be the solution? Unions have the right to protest, to draw attention to enforcement of agreement, And if they don't listen, employers don't listen, unions also have the right, to use their power of strike as contained in our labor laws. But even at that, Leila, I would like to say that there is a limit to which you can also deploy that power. It is clear now that for 16 times we've had these strikes in the sector. That means the closure of university for almost about effectively over 5 years. 5 years is enough to train pharmacists, to train doctors. It's enough to turn out economists, sociologists. So there is a limit to which you also use the power of the strike that in a way that it would not be too dysfunctional. So what I'm trying to say is that I think we need a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift will be that we should return to the culture of collective bargaining in good faith, mutual respect between the government officials as well as the academic staff union. We should know that the whole effort is for us to salvage the public universities. I read the statement of the president of ASU, Professor Emmanuel Osadeke, and he says so that they are doing this to save the universities, this struggle. Of course, I am also in a better position now to know the feelings of those who are in government, the Minister of Education, which represent the sector, the two ministers of labor, Dr. Chris Ngige, the Honorable Minister of State, Mr. Festus Keyamo, SAN, they are really genuinely concerned to also save the university. Of course, you also know President Buhari has already set up, President Muhammadu Buhari set up a special presidential committee, which is quite a bit unprecedented, chairman by the Chief of Staff, Professor Gambari. So, that at all levels, federal, ministerial level, government is also concerned to resolve this crisis. We also have the Nigerian Interreligious Agency, I think NAREC, I hope I got it right, represented by the president of CAN, of course, His Eminence Sultan Abubakar Saad. They also intervene. Parent associations, students have also done similar things. So what I want to say here is that all of us are concerned to save the public universities. So we have to look at this bigger picture, and it's time for the two parties to return back to negotiation. Indefinite, comprehensive, total strike, as understandable it may be, but it will not help the situation. And we need to revisit it. As I'm talking to you now, I think we can check the figures. We have effectively in Nigeria now 170 universities in the country. 79 of them are private universities. Federal are effectively, 48, in number. And of course, there are state universities. Now, what's the point I'm raising here is that it's public universities that ASU has strong presence, and some state universities, where, interestingly, the children of the poor are concentrated. Those who can afford are paying in private university, which, interestingly, ASU does not even have presence. They are not unionized. Private university, they are running business as usual. And I'm very sure things may not be as perfect there. But what is clear is that, in spite of imperfection, there is, education delivery is going on there. So what I want to say in summary is that I think it's time to change the paradigms in a way that we put an end to this incessant lockdown of our public university. And it's doable. It's completely doable. What is important is that we should replace diatribes with dialogue. That's the real thing in the world of work. And of course, my institute is also established to build capacity about the skills for negotiation. And other sectors you have seen that are not shut down is because dialogue is going on. I can round up my quick comment on this one to draw your attention to how the National Union of Teachers has recorded tremendous achievement without shutting down primary and secondary school education. I know NUT, National Union of Teachers, one of the oldest unions in Africa. The founding president of that union was the late father of the legendary musician, that's Ransom Kuti himself, the reverend father of Ransom Kuti. That union has come a long way. in spite of the challenges going on in primary, secondary education, to deliver decent work for teachers throughout the country. The federal government assigned the teachers' salary structure, special one, TSS. Then they also fought to increase the retirement age from 60 to 65. And in all this, they didn't grant the sector. But let me also take the last quick recent development in the energy sector. We also had the legacy crisis in which during the privatization of the PHCN, that's the old NEPA, many workers in that sector were not paid. And recently, National Union of Electricity Workers, I think I listened to a very commendable program you did on that, both Ruben and Rufai, in which you brought all the stakeholders to talk. The point I want to raise there is that the National Union of Electricity Workers, went to strike for that day. That strike did not last more than 24 hours. With all the challenges of threat to national economy, but quickly, they call it up once there is a goodwill on the part of government to say we want to negotiate. I think what is good for the energy sector is also good for the education sector. So I want to suggest here that, my comrades in ASU, they've made the point. They've really raised the awareness of the need for funding of public education. And if you check the record, they've really achieved so much, because today, the debate we are holding now is how to get resources to turn public university into places. Of course, they've not achieved most of the things that have been asked for.
Okay, comrade.
There has been some progress in terms of funding, but it's not time for cessation of hostility. And I would suggest that there's need to return back to collective bargaining process so that we address other concerns, so that our students are off the streets and they return back to school.
Okay, comrade. Well, two quick things, and if you can keep the responses a bit shorter, so that we can have more time.
Okay, that's fine.
To focus on other issues.
Okay.
One, you kept talking about legacy crisis. With regard to the education sector, whose legacy are we talking about here? Is it the Buhari legacy or some other kind of legacy? If you can just clarify that. And then secondly, what do you think of the
quickly.
Yeah, and apart from that clarification, what do you think of the no work, no pay rule that the federal government has now defined for the university teachers? And the university teachers are saying, even if they didn't work, they must be paid. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the quick one on the issue of legacy crisis, I just brought this out that, you can't resolve this problem if you don't have sense of history. What I'm saying here is that this has been the lingering crisis, spanning almost about 4 decades. In fact, not from the 1999, ASU had been fighting since 80s, 81, entirely period of military rule. We also had long prolonged strikes, 6 months, 7 months. So I want to say that you must have that idea of that sense of history, because if we are taking the same approach, getting the same result, no respect for agreement, as we go on indefinite strike with all the implications for education of our children. So we need to relook at that method. That something is inherently missing here. The culture of real proper negotiation is missing there. And I think there should be ground roots for proper negotiation, mutual respect, trust, ability to know that this is industrial dispute, not industrial warfare on the two sides, and that even in disputes, all cannot be fair, in the methods that we use. Now, on the issue of no work, no pay, again, that is also the challenge we face when you have prolonged, endless strike, which has now become the issue rather than the issue ASU is pursuing. Don't forget, it's not the first time. I know the last strike, as we went into, government also tried to enforce that. But later on, I think there was a concession in which government also paid for the period of the strike cover. But this time around, I think the position has become more hardened, because government also, for obvious reasons, have their own frustration to say that, the best way to stop the strike is to make sure that, if you are not really working, because it's also contained in the labor law. But people can also argue that what of when there's work, there's no pay. But my take on that quickly is that that's why I said, let ASU rethink the strike, suspend, return back, let government itself make sure that it has open mind to pay the workers. I mean, the staff of academic staff, so that we all return back to status quo. But it's due to the prolonged strike that the issue of no work, no pay has come into being. So what I'm trying to say here is that I think we should rather face the crisis facing the sector, which goes beyond actually remuneration for ASU. There is whole problem of efficiency of the university, the autonomy, the visitation panels report that have to be rolled out, Yes.
So, the question is,
thank you.
Go back when ASU keeps saying there's no deal on ground. That's what ASU is saying. The reason why ASU said it's a definite strike is because if you heard the last time Professor Shelake was on, he said there's no deal on ground. So, will they manufacture a deal all of a sudden? And secondly, the federal government now wants to meet with councils, university councils, and pro-chancellors and vice-chancellors. Why didn't they do this long ago? Why now?
Yeah, Rufai, I think deal cannot be done from outside, deal can be done from within through the process of collective bargaining. So it's a recurring decimal that it's better for the two parties to return back to negotiation in good spirit. And of course, talking of deal, it has to be really to be seen to be the deal. There have been a lot of motions, but I think we need real movement. There used to be Babalakin committee, which also look at the issues holistically before, but it became banana peel for Babalakin. Of course, you also have another committee, chairman by Ghazali, I've forgotten the name now. Then you have the Lulu Briggs, committee, which also works on some series of proposals. But all this with our proposals, not until they translate to doable collective agreement, which means government must also give its own opinion, ability to pay. The issue of relativity I've already raised, what is the implication? Because don't forget there was a time ASU fought for end allowance. Once they finish, I think they pay some amount of money. Then the other non-academic staff also took up the challenge that they are in the same sector. They need to be, their apply should be addressed. All this one will pass through the process of collective bargaining. So all I want to say that deal can only come through the process of negotiation, not from our side, whether government doesn't have to lock out academic staff. So also the academic staff should return back, to negotiation, suspend the strike that is going on. And because in the world of work, Rufai, the whole idea is that there should be free atmosphere for unfettered negotiation. You cannot have good negotiation if you intimidate the unions. You intimidate them, in terms of their jobs, in terms of their pay. So also, you can't have fair negotiation from any employer. If you also intimidate the employers, you operate under duress in which they are helpless from outside. I mean, I've been general secretary of a private sector union. I think, Ruben, you know this, National Union of Textile. Until I left that sector 2 years ago, we signed 45 national collective agreements in a very turbulent, labor-intensive sector as that, and no single shutdown of the entire industry. What is the miracle? The miracle is sense of compromise, of give and take, of mutual respect. I think we should know that, the word of work is not the word of war. You have to, if you can't get result from any employer, vice versa from any labor, when you engage in diatribes, when you don't recognize each other, when you can't even greet when you go for meetings with front faces. I mean, that cannot be. Negotiation means compromise. It's not what you ask for that you get. But in the long run, you get things that can be reviewed periodically over the years. Nigeria Labour Congress is tested in this field. And ASU is an affiliate of NSC. I've told you about ASU going on strike for 16 times since 1999. But within this period, NSC has signed 3 national minimum wage agreements, which also impacted on even ASU members in terms of consequential adjustment. We did one under Obasanjo. We did under Jonathan. We also did under President Buhari recently, which has moved from 18 to 30,000. But none was done through indefinite, total, comprehensive strike. It was due to negotiation. NSC asked for 96,000. We got 30. That's the reality. Because ability to pay, sustainability, but all these deals were done at the negotiating table. So I think it's time for us to build enough capacity for all the stakeholders so that we can be able to minimize this overage, industrial overage.
So, comrade,
going on in the education sector.
If I can come in here, so how do you see this situation ending or playing out? Because that looks pretty unclear. Where do you see this heading?
Well, I think I'm optimistic that it's resolvable. It's not intractable. It's industrial dispute, and I think reason will definitely prevail. I hope, as government is meeting the Committee of Vice Chancellor, they should also offer leadership to talk all to the stakeholders. Interestingly, some of them, they have dual roles to play because they are also technically members of ASU, but they are also administrators. They need to manage the university. Wait, let me tell you, Leila, no easy answer for the education sector. The word that has captured our imagination is the plight of academic staff unions. But you also know issues are more complicated than that. It's true that we need more funding, and ASU has achieved so much. I mean, it is ASU's struggle that led to TED Fund, but you also know that even TED Fund, not many companies contribute to that. But TED Fund has also done very well with little resources to build infrastructure in the university. But what of the other funding given to the universities? How are they being used? There is a lot of inefficiency. There are a lot of issues that have to be addressed. So I think we can't resolve all of them once and for all now. But what is important is that either way, there must be sustainable academic calendar, and we have to have cessation of hostility so that all the parties return back to negotiation. I have no doubt in my mind that government is eager to resolve this problem. I think government has to initiate another round of meeting, and I think ASU itself must look back. I listened to President of ASU yesterday. He said, no, they are open for discussion. They are open to government should call on them, and that's what it should be. But when government also call, we must have also the correct attitude. I mean, I find it very interesting that ASU today has no confidence with Minister of Education. Initially, it was the Ministers of Labor that they said they have no confidence in, but now, who do you have confidence in? I think for proper negotiation, let's have trust. Let's have mutual respect, and with that one, I have no doubt that this crisis will be over, just the way we put an end to it before. But we need a sustainable arrangement such that we don't have these periodic distortions of academic calendar in our public universities.
Okay, just before we go, let me ask you this. One phrase you used earlier on was paradigm shift. And then later you are talking about funding. Now, there are some people who are arguing that the Universities Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 2003, popularly referred to as the Universities Autonomy Act, talks about academic freedom. But some people are arguing that maybe the universities should also have financial autonomy. Let them go and raise their own funds and run on their own steam and creativity. And that perhaps maybe parents should not be talking about 10,000 naira. They should be ready to pay for the education of their children, even in public universities. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said all cards must be on the table for real discourse about the state of our public universities. Ruben, if me and you were in the universities in the 70s, 80s, yes, we are scholarship, but somebody actually paid for that scholarship. You have to know, state government gave us scholarship, federal scholarship, arrangement. Somebody actually paid. So what I'm trying to say here is that my take on it is that we need to look at the issue more holistically, and that's part of the whole paradigm shift I'm talking about. No easy answer. Even university have to look for way for partnership. I run an institute, it's a public institution. If I tell you my capital budget now has been drastically slashed down, but that's the reality of the economy. So we need to now look for way to look for how we can increase our charges for our training. We also have to look for partnership with development partners. That's the way the modern institutions, dealing with education are run. Nobody relies only on public budget alone. And if there's a way we can get it done, but again, all this can only be done in an atmosphere of unfettered, dialogue, not diatribes, exchange of what the way we're having it now. I know you also have your own share of it last time when you engaged with with ASU officials. I think that's the problem fatigue brings in, where you have endless prolonged strike. I mean, I had a comment, I hope it's not true, that state universities are not the way they should be. I mean, you don't need that kind of discussion. All of us need to be together. And we can also fight for ourselves alone. And I think ASU, as good as their struggles, look like, they must look at the bigger picture. In fact, unionism is about solidarity. So as you talk of your own plight, talk of the state of the industry, of the sector, the state of the national economy as a whole, and in a way that all of us can have a win-win situation. But my fear now is that we are strengthening the private university more. And the private university can only absorb very few, those who can pay. I think it's time to relook at the way we are running public universities. I mean, most of the schools that our children attend all over the world, including Ghana, they are public universities. And we need to find out the way they are run. But if we can pay some money there, I mean, for our public university in other places, we have to find a way to see how we can run our own in a way in which, at the end of the day, the children of the poor can sign in and they can graduate as I went. The prolonged strikes actually makes it more expensive for the poor who go to the university without paying the normal charge user fees. So all of us have to basically look at the challenges
Thank you very much.
in a way that we can resolve it together.
Thank you very much, Comrade Issa Aremu, for joining us on the morning.